Welcome back to Weird Tales from El Paso and part 2 of our special 2-part episode on the old Doña County Courthouse and Jail. In part 1, we explored some key dark moments in the jail's history: corruption, crime, and the inhumane conditions that made it a place of suffering for decades. We covered the mob's grip on Las Cruces, the reign of Sheriff Happy Apodaca, the tragic murder of Cricket Kugler, and the horrors endured by those locked behind the jail's walls. Now that we have that history foundation in place, we can turn our attention to the paranormal side of the story. In this episode, we'll explore the hauntings that have defined the jail in modern day. And as promised, we'll hear about shadow figures, disembodied voices, and the unsettling case of Mary Waters' death, and more. I'll also be sharing my own experience from recording inside the jail, including the freaky audio evidence we captured along the way. And to help us navigate the supernatural side of the jail story, we'll be joined by David Kreider, the jail's current caretaker and owner of Southwest Expeditions in Las Cruces. Over the years, David has gathered numerous first-hand accounts from both casual visitors and investigators alike, and has even experienced his own share of frightening encounters inside the jail. We'll also continue to hear from Ramiro Galvan of Paranormal Research Investigations, who has conducted multiple investigations and paranormal workshops inside the jail, with some spooky results. So with that said, let's step back inside the walls of the old Doña County Courthouse and Jail. I'm Adrian Mesa, and you're listening to Weird Tales from El Paso. As mentioned at the end of part 1, many ghost stories have emerged from the Doña County Courthouse and Jail. Some rooted in rumor, others in chilling first-hand accounts. But many believe that the decades-long cycle of abuse, corruption, and violence left something behind. Something that still lingers in the empty corridors and darkened cells. David Kreider and his team at Southwest Expeditions have hosted countless tours and events in the abandoned jail, collecting a lot of strange and spooky stories along the way.
The entities that call this place home, I've come to respect them. You know, this is their place. So my rathers is I'd rather not have them in the building, but that's not my call. They're here, I respect them, and I just try to work with them.
I sat down with David right in the heart of the jail annex, smack dab in the middle of cell block 2, surrounded by rows of rusted metal bunk beds and the heavy memories of the many inmates who once lived there. To add to the unease, we had REM pods set up all around us, courtesy of PRI. REM pods are tools commonly used by paranormal investigators that beep loudly when there are changes in ambient temperature or energy, which, in the world of the paranormal, usually means something is nearby. And if you listen closely, you might hear that David and I weren't exactly alone.
We got in here about 9 years ago. I was asked by a company of investors that bought this building. They plan on turning it into a 4-star hotel and conference center. Unfortunately, their plans include tearing down this jail, and in its place, they plan on putting a 4-story, 59-room, 4-star hotel, 3 restaurants, pool, sauna, cabana, full gym on the 3rd floor, things like that. So they did not quite get the investment dollars they needed, so that's why we're still here after 9 years. We've looked at the building and the activity that's been going on in the building, paranormal activity in particular, getting with PRI and some other paranormal groups. They asked us if we consider opening this up for paranormal investigations. We thought about it and go, yeah, let's open it up. So we've had, since we've done this, hundreds of groups come in, thousands of people actually, but different groups, some professional, some big names, some a lot smaller, groups of 4 or more, and they rent the building anywhere from 2 hours to 10 hours to do their investigations. And we've had, they send us their recordings and things that they've captured, plus our own experiences here, and some of the people on staff that are sensitive, that has experienced things. So it's a very interesting place.
While David and his team have played a crucial part in collecting stories of encounters inside the old jail and courthouse, he's also had his fair share of scares over the years. Enough for him to acknowledge without a doubt that something is still lurking in the building.
When I first got the building, it was what we call a dark building. There was no power. The power was shut off. The water was shut off. And I found out where the breakers were. I was handed the keys. And so the first thing I started doing is to turn on breakers to get some lights and power in this thing, figure out what we had, as well as the water. Of course, the water shut-off's in the basement. And the previous owner that had bought this building at auction for $1 million cash, he had a crew that tore into this building. It was fully furnished, everything fully functional when he got it, but he had some plans, and he just had his crew start tearing into it, and they knocked out about 40% of the electricity. All of the HVAC they took out, most of the plumbing. We still have some working plumbing up in the front for the bathrooms. So anyway, I was turning the water on and off, checking for leaks where they just cut pipes and we had to solder them back. And it was in the morning. It was a summer day, very hot. I was downstairs sweating. It was very hot in here. And this was my third trip down there, and I went in to turn the water back off because I found a leak. And as I have my handle, my back was away from the door, I heard 2 footsteps, and before I could even turn around, somebody came up right on my back, and it was a feeling of like a freezer door opening on your back, just very, very cold, and it's not a normal cold. It chilled me all the way up, my hair stood on end. And that was one of my first experiences in here. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Get away from me." That's the only thing I could think of. It didn't move. I said, "Get the heck away from me." It didn't move, and finally, at the third time, it backed off. And I was said some words and left. And it started innocently enough. The very first time I was here, I was waiting for the plumber and for the architect to show us where the water shutoff was. And they were running a little late. I was on the counter, bright sunny day. I was underneath the counter trying to get some electrical working, and I hear a couple of guys walking down the hallway, coming towards where the office is, double doors out in the hallway, talking, having a normal conversation. One had a deeper voice, one had a lighter voice. Hard sole shoes. It's always hard sole shoes that we figured out. Kind of very loud, almost amplified. And so I yelled out from under the counter, "Hey, Steve, I'm in here. Come on in." They kept on walking and talking like they were going to pass the door. Well, I'd finally got up ready to stand up. And I said, "Steve, I'm right in here." They stopped to a shuffle to a stop, right in front of the door. I expected to see him. I stood up a half second later and there's nobody there. Well, the building has quite a few windows in it, all single pane, some of them broken from attempted break-ins. And I just assumed at that time it was people carrying on a conversation walking down the street, until it was happening again. And it was one thing after another. That's why I don't come here in the day anymore, especially by myself. And they can't hurt me, I know that. They can sure startle you. And they tend to want to mess with you sometimes in a maybe a playful way from what these guys are, say, but I just would rather not be messed with at all like that. But anyway, started hearing voices, men, and I started hearing women talking, then talking at me, and then footsteps down the hallway. And one day, coming in just to get something really quick, I open up the door, close it, fast walk down the hallway, and somebody starts up behind me, heavy footsteps, trying to match my footsteps, but I was wearing sneakers, and this person was wearing hard sole shoes. So very loud. So I stopped thinking, normally that I must have left the door open and somebody followed me in. And so I turned around, there's nobody there. I go, okay. So I start walking again. They start up again, follow me all the way up to my office door, and once again stand behind me with that ice cold feeling again. And I told this person to get away, and they did. They backed off. So I left the building after that, no other occurrences, but it was things like that. And then my name being called out, closing up the main doors one day. A lady sounded like from the second or third floor yelled out my name, which I promptly ignored and closed the door. And then the jail, leaving the jail one day, I was closing the doors and I heard a male's voice in the back call my name out when I know I was the only one in here. So I disregarded that too.
Some of the most common encounters inside the jail involve the shadow figures. Dark, featureless entities that linger in the corners, peek out from doorways, and slip in and out of empty cells. According to David, 2 of them stand out in particular, one that keeps to the upper levels, and one that roams the first floor, this one making itself known in ways that are hard to ignore.
One of the things I started hearing was a jail door slamming very loudly. Now, these doors here in the jail, they weigh about 300 pounds. There's no breeze that comes through this 18,500 square foot jail. And I would hear them, I'd grab a big flashlight, I'd run down thinking, normal that somebody broke in. One of the homeless guys broke in somehow into the jail. Never found anybody. One day I was here, I heard the jail door slam again. I said, that's it, in the middle of summer. I grabbed the flashlight, I fast walked down into the jail, opened up the doors. So I'm shining the light on the jail doors as I'm passing through the hallway. And I pass one hallway that's leading into the deeper parts of the jail near the women's section. And there's a man standing there in the hallway. And he's all black, because I naturally assume because he's standing in the shadows, had his legs spread and his arms down to his side. I stopped, I looked again, and he's still standing there. It's like he wanted me to see him. So I start to raise my flashlight to spot it on him to see who he was. And he does this little sidestep thing into a jail cell, which I knew was one way in, one way out. I raised the flashlight, ran down there, ran into the cell, and he must have been standing right at the front of the cell, because I ran through what, I describe again as a freezer. It was ice cold instantaneously, and my hair went up. And I think he was just messing with me, just to get my attention, and to let me know he's the one slamming the doors. So I just fast walked out, and I'd seen videos of him through PRI, had showed me videos of him. We've caught him on tape numerous times, or people in PRI, with his voice. He's got a gravelly voice. But I never quite believed there was a shadow man here. I always thought, overactive imaginations, people are, seeing things. It is very dark and spooky. This is a spooky place. So until this day, and I had to see it for myself, I guess, and maybe that's why he did it, I fast walk out of the jail. I close the double doors to the jail, but there's windows on the jail doors. And I was thinking, okay, now what do I do if he comes and follows me? He didn't follow me, but the third door on the right, jail door, does this slow, dramatic swing and slam shut right in front of me, which I'd already spotted that thing with a flashlight twice. There was nobody in there, nobody in the jail. He was just letting me know he was the one slamming the door. So I've heard him since then. I've heard him about 8 or 9 times. I do not come back in here and check that out anymore. He can slam them off the hinges for as I care.
Apart from being loud, the roaming shadow figure on the first floor is also known for being fairly mischievous and rude, mimicking voices, turning off or unplugging electrical devices, draining batteries, and, according to some visitors, getting a little too handsy with female guests. The shadow figure on the upper levels, however, is a completely different story. This one lurks in and around the old isolation cells on the 3rd floor, the same ones Sheriff Apodaca favored for his quote-unquote extreme methods and torture. Unlike its friend on the 1st floor, this shadow is anything but playful. Visitors who get too close to its home have reported an overwhelming mix of emotions, from a dark sense of dread, extreme anger, to simple confusion. One chilling encounter with the shadow involved a teacher from Alamogordo, New Mexico, who was visiting the jail with 5 other teachers, scouting it as a possible location for a student field trip. She had no idea of the jail's haunted reputation, but she quickly learned. As the group explored the 3rd floor, she suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Shaking and pressed against the wall, she claimed to have seen a tall, black figure standing in the doorway of one of the rooms. And the moment she screamed, it crouched down, watching her intensely from the floor with glowing, red eyes. Needless to say, that was enough for everyone. The group left, cutting the tour short, and deciding against a field trip there. What a shame. I'm sure the kids would have loved it. Given what we know about the original 3rd floor jail, it's no surprise that something harsh still lingers up there. While most reports don't describe any of the entities residing in the jail as outright dangerous, that doesn't mean they couldn't be, even accidentally. And that brings me to another mysterious case from 1951, when a patrolman discovered the unconscious body of a woman named Mary Waters, lying by the nearby Amador Hotel across the street from the jail.
the case of a young waitress named Mary Waters, who was found, by a couple of local police on the street not too far from there.
This is Ramiro Galvan, an independent paranormal investigator and founder of Paranormal Research Investigations, PRI, in El Paso, Texas.
They brought her to the jail, put her in a cell, and they walked away. A couple of minutes later, they heard her scream. They ran back. They found her dead. Here's where it got interesting. The local DA pronounced her dead and based on some medical conditions without an autopsy. Now, he's not a trained physician. So then they got another physician, a local physician there in Las Cruces, and he too, said the same thing. But no official autopsy had been performed at that time. What makes it so strange about hers as well is that I found a letter during my research of the place where one of the guys on duty that night, one of the guards, had written to his local councilman because, remember, this was still in the shadows of Cricket Kugler's death. And I guess he was trying to cover his bases because he wrote on there, he says, look, we had nothing to do with her death. We didn't touch her. We put her in the cell like was written about. He says, and we walked away. He said, but when we heard her scream, we ran back. And in there, we found her dead, but her face was contorted like she had been terrified or she was scared to death.
The story of Mary Waters is one of the more mysterious tragedies tied to the jail. Though the official cause of death was a ruptured kidney and alcohol poisoning, determined without an autopsy, it's impossible to ignore the twisted terror etched on her face when she was found dead. That unsettling detail has led many to question whether her death was as simple as reported. Was there foul play from jail staff involved? Or was she scared to death by something otherworldly? It's impossible to say for sure, especially when you consider this. If Mary had been left in one of the open space cells with the other prisoners, why aren't there any reports from them or the guards that would have been in the same area? And if she'd been placed in one of the cork-lined solitary confinement cells, how did anyone hear her scream right before she died? It's a mystery we'll never solve, but it could very well be the origin of some of the other strange phenomena inside the jail. Disembodied screams from the third floor are a fairly common occurrence, one I personally experienced during my visit, and some believe that the painful wails heard by visitors could very well be Mary's.
We had a private party here in the courtroom, which we do rent out for parties and laser tag now. You can rent out the courtroom for lunch and play laser tag in the jail. But we had a young man on the staff with his wife came over to visit with the two kids. And while we were setting up the party, there was about 30 people inside the courtroom. And she's out in the hallway. And so I introduced myself again and say, hey, what you doing? She goes, well, the boys want to go down to the jail and check it out. They've heard about it. And I go, yeah, knock yourself out. And so they were standing there, and I went back in the room. I came back out, and they were gone. I said, oh, are they down in the jail? And her husband said, no, they left. And I go, why'd they leave? I thought she wanted to go down to jail. He says, well, I came out to check on her, and our younger son is crying, and he told his mom he wants to go home now. And so she bent over and says, well, why? I thought you wanted to go down to the jail. Why do you want to go home? And he goes, you can't hear that? And she goes, hear what, honey? She says he says, that lady's screaming upstairs. I want to go home. And she goes, what is she saying? And he's saying that she's screaming, help me, help me. And so he heard it. 30 kids and adults in that room didn't, and I certainly didn't hear it in the hallway. So it's very selective who hears these. And I just put it down to folks are sensitive. They're more tuned in than other folks. It's a frequency thing, maybe.
Now let's shift focus to another tragic figure whose presence still lingers within the courthouse walls. Katie, one of the more outgoing and friendly entities said to live inside the jail. Over time, her story has become one of the more infamous, one that nobody speaks of lightly. According to the stories, Katie was a young girl who met an unspeakable fate at the jail, her spirit now forever tied to the place where her life was so brutally cut short.
The little girl that's here was on the fence a long time about was she really a little girl. And we put together stories and what might have happened here only because of the number of people that have come in, different people that have heard and seen things. And I'll just give you a quick thing on Katie as to where we came to know that name. And it was over the course of 3 or 4 years, actually. One of the first recordings in the women's section, which she hangs out a lot at, And we heard a little girl saying, "Can anybody see me? Can anybody hear me?" on recording. And so, okay. And then I was upstairs one day with my ex-business partner. We were getting ready for an event, hot summer day, middle of the day. I'm in the east wing, second floor. I'm turning to go. He'd already left the room, and right on where my waist is, waist high, I heard clearly a little girl ask me, "Can you see me?" Then I don't answer them. I just scream for Miguel, say, "Miguel, get in here. Did you hear that?" And he didn't hear it. And it's always the way. It is always the way. It's frustrating. Since then, we've had different people see and hear her and talk to her. There was this slim little hallway that's back in behind the women's section. It's a guard's pass-through. It's the darkest place in the entire building. That includes the basement. And I had one lady come in. She says, "I like the tour, but did you notice the blood back there?" And I said, "Ma'am, there's no blood back there. I've been in every place in here, and maybe pain." She goes, "No, I'm a trauma nurse. I know blood when I see it." So she finally convinced me to go look. So we went back there and looked, and to me, it was a large pool of what looked like red blood on the floor in this little narrow hallway. And she says, "Look at the door." So there was 3 looked like smeared fingerprints down low. So we eventually knew somebody that called the forensic guy. He actually came over at lunch from Las Cruces. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. Comes over with his little bag and tested it. He says, "Yeah, this is blood, but old blood." He called the sheriff on us and says, "I got to do this when, there's things like this, but it's old blood." So the sheriff left. He spent 2 hours here looking for where the blood came from. He says, "I've got 2 theories," because I asked him. And he says, he told me the first theory. Somebody broke in, had a little girl with them. And the reason he mentions the little girl, and I didn't see this, nobody else saw it until he pointed it out. But in the blood on the right-hand side, very clearly at the time, there was this little footprint. And you could clearly see the toes, the heel, and the pad. And he said, "Did you notice that?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, that's a footprint of an adolescent female between 7 and 9 years old." And, how do you know that? And he said, "Well, it's my job to know." He said, "But where's the left one? It should have been right in the center of this blood." And so that's why he took off looking for the blood. Any other things on the windows, on the bars, on the cell doors, exterior doors. Spent 2 hours doing that. Came back and says, "Nah, what happened here, this blood happened here, right here." I said, "Well, what's your second theory?" And he says, "It was a ritual." He said, "Somebody unfortunately brought somebody in, did them in, and left. Took it with them." Then we've had some mediums come in. There's one particular lady, an older lady, very quiet. She was with a team of lady investigators, and she stood there in front of that door with her crew. So I walk over to her and I said, "Well, it's really sad what happened here." And I was about to tell her what I knew. She told me, "David, it's sadder than you think." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "There's a little girl standing here. Her name is Katie," she says, "and she's 7 years old, and she was murdered and raped in this room." And I got a little upset. I said, why the heck is she here in this godforsaken place, the darkest place in the building, a jail for that matter? Why didn't she move on? And she looked back in there, looked back at me and said, she said it's because she doesn't know where her mom and dad is, and this is the only family she knows.
So this is where Katie's story gets even more intriguing. While the details surrounding Katie's presence in the jail are undeniably dark, I haven't been able to find any hard documented evidence connecting the disappearance or death of a little girl to the jail. Neither has Ramiro or anyone from PRI. Instead, Ramiro has a different theory. One that ties Katie's presence back to one of the most horrific crimes that took place in the women's section of the jail in 1976. The very area where Katie is often heard or felt.
I never documented, in all the time I've been there, and I've been back to do training sessions and other investigations there, I've never recorded the sound of a young lady or a little girl. I've never found any evidence, any proof, both either in articles, newspaper, online research, or in my own investigations there using my equipment. I'm very hesitant to say, matter of fact, I will not say it is a girl. Because in my experience doing this, I have found sometimes that if something is there, it may not want to be identified as to who they really are, and they'll disguise themselves. Now, often people have said they've seen a shadow figure near the women's section area. And to this day, I kind of wonder, or I theorize that maybe the person that they see near the women's area is maybe Hamilton, one of the ones who participated in the rape of the 2 teenagers because he was sentenced to life in prison for murder. So is it him still wandering around there looking for prey?
So, this is a pretty disturbing theory Ramiro puts out there, but one not without merit, especially when you consider what's been experienced in the women's section. As he mentioned, a shadow figure is often seen there, sometimes accompanied by disembodied female wails or voices. It could be the same mischievous shadow figure that roams the rest of the first floor and has a reputation for getting a little too close to female visitors. But what if it's something else? Something darker and more aggressive? Could it be Topper Hamilton, still lurking in the women's section even after death? Is he the shadow figure messing with female visitors to the jail? Or is it a completely separate entity altogether? Or did Topper leave a part of himself behind? A dark piece that refuses to let go of its old hunting grounds, like the sick predator he was in life, finding life again within the jail walls. Over time, David and his team have been given audio recordings captured in the women's section, some featuring a young girl's voice, presumably Katie's. Occasionally, though, that voice has been drowned out by an angry, booming male voice, one that seems almost possessive, as if whatever it belongs to isn't just lingering, but laying claim to the area. If this shadow is tied to Topper in some way, then are the female voices echoes of the past, reliving their worst moments over and over again? And just as disturbing, is little Katie really the spirit of a small child who became a victim of a terrible crime? Or a disguise for whatever lurks in the darkness of the women's section? Who knows? But one thing is certain. Despite being abandoned, the jail is far from empty. While I could easily turn this into a 4-hour deep dive into every story, theory, and spirit set to haunt the jail, why not take a trip to Las Cruces and experience it for yourself? Thanks to David Kreider and his team at Southwest Expeditions, you can visit the Doña Ana County Courthouse and Jail and walk through its dark halls, stand in its eerie corners, and maybe even cross paths with some of the spirits we've talked about, along with a few that I didn't. Maybe you'll spot the judge, who, according to claims, likes to linger on his balcony at night. Or maybe you'll hear the heavy footsteps of Bubba in the main hall marching right up to you. Or maybe you'll encounter Edgar, the crazy entity in the basement who doesn't like people in his space and has a tendency to scare them out. More on him in a bit. So I arrived at the jail to gather my first interviews for this podcast at around 1 p.m. on a super warm afternoon this past summer. David pulled up shortly after me, and we chatted for a bit by the main entrance before heading inside. This was my first time ever at the jail, so I had no idea what to expect. I tried to brace myself for anything, having been warned about its reputation, but that lasted about 2 seconds. Despite the heat outside, the moment I stepped through the front door, I got hit with a blast of freezing air. So cold it actually kinda shocked me. Goosebumps crawled up and down my arms and back, and my hair stood straight on end. David, on the other hand, was sweating from the heat. Just another day at the courthouse for him. And even after a few minutes inside, I couldn't shake this weird, uneasy feeling. Sure, part of it was just being inside such a visually creepy, stuffy place. But there was also something else, something I can't really describe. It wasn't exactly heavy, but off. Like something was lingering in the air, or I don't know. Again, it's very hard to describe. Anyway, Ramiro, who was setting up for a video tour that would take place later that evening, told me at the end of the night that I kept, quote-unquote, reacting to things. Shuffling my feet, shifting my shoulders, glancing around, etc. Little movements I wasn't even aware I was doing. So, fair to say I was definitely feeling something. David took me on a quick tour of the jail annex, leading us through the cell blocks, murderer's row, and the women's section before letting me sit up in the middle of cell block 2. With REM pods beeping all around us, and Ramiro, along with some of David's team, keeping an ear out for unexpected visitors, we started the recording session, and it was interesting. A few times, I felt sudden bursts of cold air on my back that would stop just as quickly as they came. And at another point, it even felt like someone was leaning over my shoulder. After wrapping up the interview with David, I stuck around and joined the team for the video shoot with Ramiro. With the sun setting, I pulled out my audio recorder and mic and followed him, David, David's team, and his videographer, Tyler, through every inch of the building, from the roof to the basement. And the entire time, that weird feeling never left. Oh, but don't get me wrong. As someone who's always been into the paranormal, I was having a blast. But that didn't mean my curiosity didn't sometimes turn to fear. Like when I felt I was being followed down the stairs coming back from the roof. That was not fun. And all throughout the shoot, we would hear random noises from the cell blocks, the third floor, the sounds of cell doors slamming shut. So many weird random occurrences. And at one point, something was tugging at my headphones wire right as Ramiro began talking about Mary Waters on the third floor. So, again, freaky but fun. So now I bet you're wondering, what exactly did we capture? Well, let's finally get into it, because we caught some freaky stuff. So first up, we have an EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, that was captured by one of Ramiro's cameras in that annex jail hallway at 4:02 in the afternoon. At this point in the day, we had just wrapped the podcast session and were gearing up for the video tour shoot. You can hear Ramiro and the rest of us chatting in the distance. Alright, here's the same clip again, now cleaned up. Did you catch it? So to us, it sounds like a male voice saying, "It's hot." And when you consider the jail's history, specifically the extreme temperatures the prisoners often had to endure, it makes you wonder, was this just a random phrase? Or was someone from the past reminding us of what they went through on similar hot summer evenings? So this next clip is interesting because we actually captured a handful like it throughout the night. I'm just going to play this particular sample, one that I caught on my own equipment while we were heading down into the basement. Alright, one more time, cleaned up. So to me, this sounds like a very clear moan, or hiss. Take your pick. While this one was captured near the basement entrance later in the evening, we picked up similar noises in the women's section and in cell block 2. Could it be the same entity following us around? Or were multiple things making similar noises? Hard to say. So again, in that last clip, we were making our way down into the basement. And these next two clips were caught when we were actually down there. If you remember earlier, I mentioned a crazy and territorial entity known as Edgar, who supposedly spends his time in the basement and isn't shy about letting people know when they've invaded his space. Though he's never been straight up aggressive, he's definitely active. And he makes his presence known in a few different ways. When we got down into the basement, a very cluttered and messy space with many rooms full of ancient equipment and honestly falling apart, I was again hit with a super cold rush of air, like I had just walked into a freezer. Meanwhile, David, again just like before, was totally fine, still warm from the summer evening heat. As we explored the basement, I started picking up on weird buzzing noises in my headphones coming from one of the rooms, and I walked through, letting Ramiro know what I was hearing. You can hear the rest of the group chatting in another part of the basement while Ramiro and I checked out the room. And while everything seemed normal in the moment, what I ended up capturing is nothing short of freaky.
Did you hear that? No.
One more time, cleaned up.
Did you hear that? No.
I have to be honest. This one unsettled me more than the others we've gone over so far. I mean, for starters, I captured it right in front of me while I was backing out of the room, and none of us heard anything at the moment. Whatever it was literally right in front of me. And I mean, just listen to it again. That sound is just so off and weird. Ugh, it makes my skin crawl. If it is Edgar, he definitely lives up to his weird reputation at the jail. So this second basement clip was captured around the same time as the last one. As I walk back towards the group, still recording, you can hear Tyler, David's videographer, geeking out over a massive old safe in one of the other rooms with David. But pay close attention to what happens right after Tyler laughs.
Can you imagine how much pot they get in these things at one time?
They did.
Whoa.
Guns, yeah, they even hit them.
So did you miss it? Let me clean it up a bit and isolate it for you.
Can you imagine how much pot they get in these things at one time?
Whoa. So that's pretty freaky too, right? That's two strange and unsettling sounds captured almost back to back in the basement. And to me, this one sounds like Edgar might be teasing Tyler, mocking his laugh with his own. Or maybe Edgar just really appreciates a good antique safe like Tyler does. Who knows? Either way, with a laugh like that, whatever's lurking in the basement sounds like it would be right at home in Gotham City. Whoa. And finally, we come to the most bizarre and unexplainable EVP we captured that night. One that wasn't just caught on my equipment, but also on 2 Ring cameras David had set up near the main office. In this clip, Tyler is setting up for a shot right outside the main office doors, while the rest of us take a quick break. You can clearly hear Ramiro searching for his water, saying he left it somewhere. And that's when this happened.
Yeah, I don't see
I think I left my water there too. Somewhere.
somewhere over the rainbow.
Now, I don't think I have to clean this one up to make it obvious, so I'll just play it again.
Yeah, I don't see
I think I left my water there too. Somewhere.
somewhere over the rainbow.
So to my ears, that is very obviously a voice singing part of Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz, starting right after Ramiro said somewhere while searching for his bottle of water, making fun of him for misplacing it essentially. So other than the fact that we captured singing, there are a few other things that make this clip really bizarre. Like, no one in the group heard anything out of the norm, despite how loud it sounds in the clip. And I can also guarantee none of us randomly burst into song. And while it might sound like a child at first, maybe even Katie, the more you listen to it, the more it actually sounds like an adult male voice, singing in a mocking falsetto. Again, teasing Ramiro as he looks for his water. That brings me back to the theory that Katie may not be what she seems. That maybe it's Topper Hamilton Jr., or maybe something else entirely. disguising itself as a little girl named Katie. Ultimately, it's impossible to say, but I will tell you this. Once you realize it's a male voice singing, that clip suddenly feels a lot less innocent and playful. And if you listen to the extended version of this phenomenon captured on the Ring camera in the office, it might even begin to feel a bit sinister. Take a listen.
The vault when I go to the statement, and the city people found out when they came in. There was a city engineer, 2 other people came in, and it was being packed. So the city people went down this way. They went to check out. I don't know what the hell they were checking out.
Yeah, that's weird. I can guarantee you that no one was breathing that close and heavy to the Ring camera in the office. And to top it all off, both Ring cameras also completely glitched out when this was captured. The audio was still recorded, but both video streams turned into a pixelated mess. Like whatever did this didn't want to be seen. So yeah, strangely enough, there was definitely something singing in the office with us that night. But if you ask me, it sure as hell wasn't the spirit of the small child. Though, I will say, the idea of Topper, or any of the other entities haunting the jail, being Wizard of Oz fans, enough to sing like that anyway, is kind of hilarious. And with that, we've reached the end of the special 2-part episode on the old Doña Ana County Courthouse and Jail in Las Cruces, New Mexico. If you ever get a chance to visit the old courthouse and jail, please have fun, but stay respectful, because while the place may look empty and abandoned, you'll be far from alone. Believe me. And if you'd like to take a closer look at some of the evidence, please check out the show notes for photos, links, and even the corrupted footage from the Ring cameras from this last clip. Who knows? Maybe you'll catch something the rest of us missed. Thank you all again for listening, and for your kind reviews and ratings, and for reaching out asking for more episodes. Like I've said before, this podcast is a labor of love, and as long as there's demand, I'll keep doing my best to deliver. I've already got some other episodes in the works that I can't wait to share with you. But until then, keep it weird, El Paso. Weird Tales from El Paso was produced, written, and edited by me, Adrian Mesa, with original music by Aaron Mesa. I'd like to thank all the guests of the podcast for sharing their stories and expertise with us, and for their contribution to the folklore and culture of the borderland. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes. And if you'd like to share your own experience with us, please reach out at bluelabpro.com/WTF El Paso. Thanks.